You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Annie from Boston.
And I'm Johanna from rainy Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted by two women who never met in real life, but who still have one common goal, and that's to prove that the past is never as dead as it seems to be.
That's right. Welcome to another episode of Fresh Hell, where true crime, history, and the delightfully macabre are always on the menu. Before we jump in, we have a quick but sincerely heartfelt shout out to our newest patrons. Thank you to Lil Psych, great username, JS, Sean Gibbs, and Erin Beveridge. Thank you so much. We have more.
I have more for you.
Yeah.
Victoria Rodriguez, Samantha Lark, and Linda Wolinski. Thank you so much. You just joined yesterday and today.
Thank you. Thank you. Sincerely. Our patrons keep the lights on, the coffee flowing, the newspaper subscriptions paid, and the dark tales coming. If you would like to join our coven of curious minds and help us keep telling the stories that make your hair stand on end, please head on over to patreon.com/freshhellpodcast. We promise exclusive content, early access, and monthly live stream get-togethers, at the very least.
Before we start, I just have to say something that usually is Annie's part to say. We have thunderstorms going on right now outside. The wind is howling. It's kind of like this ambient sound, maybe, if you hear it in the background. If not, great. If you hear something, it's world under here.
It could also be my stomach growling. I don't know what's happening, but it's extremely loud. It's not upset. I've eaten. I don't know. My digestive system is just part of the chat today, so hopefully I'll catch it. All right. Now, this week, we are venturing back in time, 1982. The year of my favorite movie. Just kidding. E.T. traumatized me. If you've been listening to us for a long time, you already know my deep, dark history. Complicated, complex history with E.T. It's fine. But that's not what we're tackling today, because 1982 is also the year when a trusted bottle in your medicine cabinet suddenly turned into a potentially silent killer. We're talking about the Tylenol murders, 7 deaths that forever changed how we buy our over-the-counter cures, and a case that's still, to this very day, unsolved.
Let me tell you one thing. We wanted to cover this case for ages. It's one of those stories that stuck with me ever since I first read about it. How many times have I said it on this podcast? So, of course, the second we start working on it for the episode, guess what happens? I turn on Netflix one evening and I see they've just released a new documentary about it. I think it's a 3-part documentary. I haven't watched it yet, so I can't tell you if it's worth your time. But I'm really planning on watching it this week, so I can tell you more about what I think about it next week.
Me too. Yeah, I haven't watched it yet either.
Neither, no? Right.
No.
So if you've seen it already, let me know what you think and we'll chat about it next time.
Definitely. You know, it's funny because this has happened quite a few times where one of us is researching something, but I think it's actually a good thing. Like I said, we haven't watched the documentary yet, but hopefully, like in the past, we bring different information, hopefully, maybe, to you. So, quick note before we begin, as we said, we're going to be discussing poisonings and the sudden death and symptoms that come from cyanide poisoning, which are terrible. Listener discretion is advised. And if you're listening somewhere where you just don't want to have to explain cyanide capsules to a stranger, maybe pop the headphones in now or hit pause before you roll up to the Dunk's delivery driver. What's the window? Drive-through. Always. Always. I had to stop going to a specific Dunkin' Donuts because I pulled in one too many times when it was like, and that's when the head was found in the freezer. And it's like, oh man, I'm sorry. Sorry, lady. So, Johanna, I have to say that this story has always struck me really hard because Tylenol was such a consistent, constant presence in most American homes. For so many families across America, it was the go-to painkiller, the only cure for trusted cure, for headaches and fevers. One interesting thing about Tylenol is in America, we often use the term. So, for example, if we want a bandage, we'll say Band-Aid, which is a name brand. Or do you have a Kleenex, which again is a name brand for tissues to blow your nose. I know in England, in the UK, they'll often say that they really need to Hoover, right, which is a brand name of a vacuum. Is there anything like that in Austria where you all call something by the brand name?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's getting less and less because the younger kids or the younger generations are watching now a lot of German YouTube and TikTok, and they have, again, completely different things they say. But used to be for tape was Tixo, or is Tixo, I still call it that.
Oh,
People
yeah,
my
like
generation
Scotch
call
tape
it.
for us.
And for, yeah, exactly. And for glue,
Yes.
like Elmer's glue or something like that, it's Uhu,
Got it.
which is also
Oh,
an
I
owl.
love that. So in the USA, Tylenol is the premier brand name for acetaminophen pills. If you're asking for pain relief in the US, someone would probably say, hey, do you have a Tylenol or a Motrin? Because those are leading brands of acetaminophen and ibuprofen. But there are a lot of people out there, myself included, who are not supposed to take ibuprofen. If you have certain cardiac issues or heart disease, or if you're like me and you have GI issues, it can be really hard on the system. So we're told to take Tylenol or acetaminophen, which I know in the UK is called paracetamol. So paracetamol and acetaminophen are interchangeable when you're traveling, right? Does that make sense? Do you have Tylenol in Austria? Is it a different?
Well, the generic is paracetamol, so paracetamol is what we use, but we don't have the brand Tylenol. I had to look it up because I wasn't even quite sure. I think the most known brand for paracetamol here would be McFarland. So my mom swears by it, and she's troubled by a lot of chronic pain, and it's always been like McFarland has always been a staple in our house. The thing I could figure out is that it used to be very unusual for me to see pain medication in bottles like you have them. Now I'm used to it because my husband often brings home bottles of paracetamol from the Peak stores. But usually most of our medication, not just pain medication, but most of our medication comes in blisters.
Yeah, blister packs are way more of a thing over there. It's rare here to even have prescription meds in a blister pack. Sometimes you will if you're taking like a Z pack, for instance, where it's like take 2 this day and it just spells out which day to take your pills. I know that you can also, as a caregiver, you can like send pills out or ask your pharmacy to do that for you. So like you can have them blistered together as like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that kind of thing. But generally here, like over-the-counter medications, you're just going to get in a really big bottle. If you can get them in a small blister pack, but you go through them so frequently, that it makes financial sense to just buy the big, bottle. And the big issue, of course, in this case, comes from the way Tylenol or most medication at that time used to be packaged. So let's start at the beginning. What is Tylenol? How is it used? Where does it come from? Why was it so popular? And how did it become the household name we know today? Because before Tylenol became the center of a true crime story, it was simply a little red and white bottle that lived in everyone's bathroom cabinet. At its core, Tylenol is the brand name for acetaminophen, which, as we just said, you might know better as paracetamol if you're outside of the US. Chemically, it's an analgesic, meaning it relieves pain, and an antipyretic, meaning it reduces fever. But unlike other common painkillers, Tylenol is not anti-inflammatory. That's important because it makes it a different tool in the medicine chest. Perfect for headaches, fevers, minor aches and pains, but not the go-to for swelling or inflammation, like arthritis, for example, or a pulled muscle. right? So why do we use it? Well, Tylenol has carved out its place because it's generally considered gentler on the stomach than many other painkillers. Aspirin and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, like ibuprofen, can cause stomach irritation or even ulcers with prolonged use, which is why I can't use it if you have a history of ulcers, right? Bad news.
Yeah. Or I also had to stop taking ibuprofen, which was my go-to for decades for my period pain, and I had to switch to
Same.
paracetamol.
Yep.
Paracetamol.
Acetaminophen doesn't give you the same problems. It's a milder option, and for millions of people who can't tolerate those NSAIDs, NSAID stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, by the way. It's really a lifesaver. It's also widely recommended for children, older adults, and anyone with a sensitive stomach. Basically, Tylenol, acetaminophen, it's the safe choice for the everyday aches and fevers in life. But let's rewind for a moment because Tylenol didn't just show up in the 1980s. It's got a backstory stretching all the way back to the late 19th century. In 1886, a compound called acetanilide was introduced into medical practice under the name antifebrin. It was an anti-aniline derivative that worked as a pain reliever as well as fever reducer. People thought they'd found the next big thing until they realized it wasn't all great, because acetanilide had a negative side to it. It caused something called methemoglobinemia, a condition where the iron in your blood's hemoglobin gets stuck in the wrong state, ferric instead of ferrous, which means your red blood cells can't carry oxygen properly. In short, it turns your blood into a suffocation trap. Not great when you're trying to cure a fever. So scientists, being scientists, started to look for alternatives, and that's where acetaminophen comes in. The first people to synthesize it was Harmon Northrop Morse at Johns Hopkins University in 1877. But despite this early discovery, it didn't leap onto pharmacy shelves right away. It would be another decade before someone decided to see how it worked in the human body. And that someone was Joseph von Mering. In 1887, von Mering tried paracetamol on humans and decided it wasn't all that exciting. He thought it had a slight tendency to cause methemoglobinemia, much like acetanilide. So instead, von Mering and the medical world turned it into another derivative called phenacetin, which they thought was safer and better. And for a while, phenacetin was the star. Phenacetin became hugely popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So popular, in fact, that it helped establish Bayer as a major pharmaceutical power. Paracetamol, meanwhile, was shelved and sort of forgotten. But von Mering's claims about paracetamol's toxicity turned out to be not entirely accurate. In the 1940s, researchers started to look at how antacetalide and phenacetin actually worked in the body. In 1947, David Lester and Leon Greenberg found that paracetamol was a major metabolite of acetanilide in humans. That is, when your body broke down acetanilide, it ended up as paracetamol anyway. And in studies with lab rats, they discovered that paracetamol didn't cause the same dangerous blood changes that acetanilide did. The next year, in 1948, it was confirmed that paracetamol wasn't just a byproduct of these other drugs. It was a potent painkiller in its own right, and it didn't carry the same nasty side effects. They also figured out that methemoglobinemia was caused by a different metabolite altogether, phenylhydroxylamine, not paracetamol itself. A follow-up study in 1949 nailed down another critical fact. Phenacetin, the safer painkiller everyone had turned to, was also metabolized into paracetamol in the body. This was the rediscovery of paracetamol. Realizing the supposed wonder drug, phenacetin, owned its power to paracetamol all along. With this revelation, the medical community took another look at paracetamol, and in 1950, paracetamol was first marketed in the United States under the name Trigesic. It wasn't a solo act, though. It was part of a 3-drug combo with aspirin and caffeine, which honestly sounds not unlike what we today use for migraines.
Also for like flu with the, like we have one here. If you like go through the day and you
daytime
have, like,
cold medicine that has caffeine in it.
Yeah, the daytime, exactly, with the caffeine, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Unfortunately, 3 people developed a rare blood disorder called a granulocytosis after using it, which led to removal from the market. But later investigations showed that the paracetamol itself wasn't to blame, and it made its cautious return. It was some weird combination problem of it must have been too much of something or not enough of another, right? That made some people sick.
Also maybe because it was just 3 people that they know of, maybe something genetic that they also have.
Or an unusual allergy. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that, exactly. Like where all the stars align in the worst possible way.
That's it. It sometimes happens. There was something going around the socials just recently, like about a little girl that was given like very light anesthesia for dental procedure and unfortunately didn't make it. Anytime you do anything new, it's so rare though. Oh, the Tylenol brand itself first popped onto the scene in 1955 thanks to McNeil Laboratories, a small family-run pharmaceutical outfit. That year, 2 brothers took over the company from their father, and one of them came across paracetamol. At that time, it hadn't made its debut yet in the American market. They saw an opportunity, and instead of going head-to-head with aspirin, which was already the reigning champion of the medicine cabinet, they decided to market their new product as a fever reducer for kids. They even gave it playful packaging, a bright red fire truck, complete with the slogan, "For little hotheads." That's adorable for your child with a fever. The name Tylenol and the generic name acetaminophen came straight from the mouthful of a chemical name behind the drug, N-acetyl-para-aminophenol, or APAP if you're feeling fancy. See, why was that not hard? It's fine. Just a few short years later, in 1959, Johnson & Johnson stepped in and bought McNeil. By 1959, Tylenol was available over the counter for adults, too. That was the turning point. No more doctor's note required. Just walk into your pharmacy and grab a bottle. It was an instant success. Suddenly, Tylenol wasn't just for kids. It was for everyone. From headaches to muscle pain, from colds to postpartum recovery, Tylenol became the go-to for quick relief.
That was a loud thunder now.
Was it?
Loud.
I couldn't hear it.
In the 1960s and 1970s, Tylenol's popularity exploded, and part of that was thanks to some very smart advertising. McNeil, which by then had become a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson, poured money into marketing campaigns that emphasized Tylenol's safety and reliability. The ads leaned heavily on images of busy parents, active families, and the trusted relief. Tylenol, that was the friend in the medicine cabinet. Tylenol wouldn't let you down. And of course, by the early 1980s, Tylenol had become an absolute titan in the world of the over-the-counter medicine. It was everywhere. It was in pharmacies, it was in supermarkets, it was in tiny corner stores. You could find it everywhere in the States. And it was the undisputed leader of the painkiller market in the US, controlling more than a third of all over-the-counter pain relievers sold. That's huge. Think of all the brands, of all the ways pain relievers work, and Tylenol had 1/3 of the market. 1/3. And I mean, it makes sense, right? It had a proven track record for treating the minor aches and pains that simply come with everyday life. Whether it's a tension headache after a long day at work, or a low-grade fever that sneaks up on you, Tylenol is what most people reached for first. That being said, acetaminophen isn't completely harmless. One of the biggest risks is that it's surprisingly easy to overdose on. Unlike some other painkillers which cause more immediate symptoms if you take too much, acetaminophen can sneak up on you. Too much of it, especially over a few days, can cause serious liver damage. In fact, acetaminophen overdose is one of the leading causes of acute liver failure in the United States today. So that's why the labels always warn you not to exceed the daily dose and to also be mindful of other products that might also contain acetaminophen. But even with that risk, Tylenol still remains a staple in most people's medicine cabinets. It's recommended by pediatricians, general practitioners, and pharmacists.
Yes, and what's also interesting is Tylenol is now available in just about every form you can imagine. Tablets, caplets, gel caps, liquids, chewables for kids. I'm sure most of our listeners, if you're in the US, you've used it in one form or another under this name or that name, you know?
Mm-hmm. All right, so enough with the history of Tylenol.
It doesn't actually have a theme song.
If you're still here, thank you.
Well, it's one of those things too. Like, I don't think we talk about this too much in this episode, but it probably bears a brief mention. I feel like when I was in college, it was a thing to take, they'd say, take Tylenol before bed and then you won't get a hangover.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Same here.
Yeah.
Or Espro.
Don't do that. Yeah. What you need to do is just have a lot of water. Drink a whole bunch of water and have a piece of fruit.
Because the dehydration is what gets you. And, salty food and fat.
That's right.
You need
That's
that.
exactly right.
Electrolytes. You're missing electrolytes. Anyway, so it's now late September 1982 and we're in Chicago, in the Chicago area. The summer heat has finally come to an end and the days are starting to feel cooler and crisper. It's the time Annie likes.
It is.
And the kids have been back to school for a bit now already, and you know how it goes. The kids are complaining about early wake-ups, and the parents are juggling work and grocery runs and soccer or football practice. And, then there's these first little sniffles of the season. And in nearly every home, in nearly every bathroom cabinet or kitchen drawer, there's a little red and white bottle. Tylenol, Extra Strength. The one you grab without thinking for, as we said, for the headaches, the fevers, the phantom aches where you're not even sure what it is. And why not? As we said, it's the safe choice, the gentle choice. Aspirin, that's too tough on your stomach. Tylenol, that's the friendly alternative, your family friend, it's trusted.
That's right. And the other thing that we need to mention is that in 1982, when you reached for Tylenol or any medicine that you bought at the pharmacy, you did not see a product wrapped in warnings or layers of plastic and foil with complicated cap mechanics. You didn't think twice about it because there just wasn't anything to think about. The idea of tamper-evident packaging, the little plastic seal or foil barrier you see today, it didn't exist yet, or at least it wasn't the standard. Back then, you would just twist open the bottle, dig around in there. Often my parents, would give the kids, it's like, can you get this wad of cotton out of here? I can't get my finger into that opening, And that's all it was. You'd dig out that wad of cotton. If there was a wad of cotton even in there, it might not have been. They might have just been shaken up in there all willy-nilly. But it was super easy to gain access to those capsules, just rattling away in their bottle. You pop the cap, you tip a couple into your hand, chase them down with some water or light beer, whatever you have on hand. Easy peasy, right? You did not wonder if someone else had been in that bottle before you. The thought never crossed your mind. And it's hard to imagine that level of trust today, isn't it? We're so used to tamper-evident seals, those annoying little plastic rings on milk jugs, the click of a fresh soda cap, trying to get the foil under, the bottle of ibuprofen. When your fingernail won't do it and then you have to go to the drawer and get a knife or a scissor and just stab.
And never use your teeth.
Yes. There was none of that in 1982. No. We were smoking our Marlboros, we were drinking our Tab, we were covering ourselves in Bain de Soleil tanning oil, and no law out there existed saying manufacturers had to make their packaging tamper-proof. This was before the era of constant recalls, way before viral social media warnings, before 24-hour news cycles and push notifications. It's hard to imagine, but back then, if a product was recalled, You'd hear about it in the evening news, maybe in the paper the next day. Word traveled more slowly, and the idea that you'd need to check to see if anything happened to make your medication unsafe? No, that wasn't part of the routine.
Unless you live in Bedford Falls.
Unless you live in Bedford Falls. There's definitely a certain sort of nostalgia that comes when you look back on those days. It was a simpler time, absolutely. But weren't we also a little bit more vulnerable, maybe?
Definitely. It's the same with children. I too think about the children nowadays, and they're never going to experience this freedom of running around outside, no cell phone with them, no mobiles, not being under surveillance the whole time. But also, children got taken a whole lot, and you didn't even hear about that because
yeah, they did. But I think that's something that also, it's like today we feel like there's a lot more violence in the world than there was then. I think today we just hear about all of it. We're aware of all of it.
We're more people equals more violence.
Right. Well, and this is also pre-Adam Walsh, which was really the event that changed all that for people too. We're just talking about, in this podcast, what we like to do is take you back to a simpler time before somebody really, really terrible came in and just spoiled the party for everyone.
Yeah, and the thing is, we take you back to a simpler time and show you that there was no simpler time.
No. It's always been terrible.
All right, now let's get to the nitty-gritty horrible stuff that's going to happen in this episode.
Yeah, now we have to really... okay, this is where things get... This first one is
really... I mean, all of these victims
all awful.
Are horrible.
Yeah.
So the first victim was Mary Kellerman, a 12-year-old girl from Elk Grove Village, which is a quiet suburb of Chicago. And she lived there with her parents, Dennis and Jean, and Mary was their only child. Mary was like any other 7th grader. She, probably liked riding her bike, reading the latest library books, and hanging out with her friends after school. And on the morning of 28th of September 1982, Mary woke up feeling a little off. Nothing dramatic, just the usual early autumn sniffles. Her nose was runny, her throat was sore, and she had a mild fever. And her parents decided to keep her home from school that day. And it happens every day, right? Kids stay home from school, spending the day resting, maybe reading a book or watching cartoons on the couch. Maybe your granddad comes over and reads you a story about the Dread Pirate Roberts. I don't know. In any case, just a day or two later, the kids are as good as new and they go back to school. And it happened to all of us, right? And it happened to Mary Kellerman that day. So Mary's mom gave her a Tylenol Extra Strength capsule to help with the fever. Just one. And within minutes of taking the Tylenol, Mary complained that she didn't feel right. She said she felt dizzy. Her parents thought she might be coming down with the flu or maybe just needed more sleep. So they told her, you know what? Go and lie down and rest. But things escalated alarmingly quickly. Mary's parents rushed to her side as she stumbled into the bathroom. She collapsed, her skin turned pale, and she was breathing inconsistently and with lots of effort. It was really hard for her to breathe. So Dennis and Jean frantically called 911. They must have thought it was some sort of allergic reaction, maybe a seizure. Anything but what it actually was. The paramedics arrived within minutes and rushed Mary to the hospital, but it was too late. By 7 a.m., just a couple of hours after she woke up, Mary was gone. And imagine being her parents. Like 1 minute your daughter has a mild cold, and the next you're in the hospital room staring at a doctor who can't tell you why she died. Because at first no one had any idea what had happened. There were no obvious signs of trauma or illness. The doctors were baffled. They ran tests, they combed through her medical history, but there was nothing to go on. Was it a freak heart condition? An allergic reaction to something she'd eaten, or, just an inexplicable but very tragic fluke. Obviously, at that moment, there was no reason to suspect foul play. Nobody could even imagine that in just a few hours, the same nightmare would repeat itself in another's family home. Because Mary Kellerman was the first victim, but she wouldn't be the last.
The thing that's so devastating for me about Mary's passing is her specific age.
Yeah.
When you're a 12-year-old girl in 7th grade is like first crushes and first training bra and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And her parents, it's just, yeah. Adam Janus was a 27-year-old postal worker, and according to everything that we read, he was one of those people who was always helping others. He was a hardworking, stand-up man. He was the sort of neighbor who would shovel your side of the sidewalk without being asked. Just overall, really kind, friendly guy. He loved spending time with his 2 children, and his hobby was building and repairing clocks. Smart guy. His roots were Polish. He was part of a really tight-knit community in the Chicago suburbs. So I'm guessing he lived in Arlington Heights, which I'm guessing is sort of like a lot of our cities have, like the Polish neighborhood, the Irish neighborhood. And Arlington Heights, I guess, was just a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood where it seemed like a really close neighborhood where people watched out for each other. And the biggest excitement in town was usually a high school football game. Like idyllic. On the morning of September 29th, 1982, Adam wasn't feeling great. He had chest pains and kind of a dull headache. Nothing dramatic, but enough that he decided to leave work early. On his way home, he picked up his daughter and grabbed a bottle of Tylenol Extra Strength because, of course he did. That's what everyone took if you felt like a cold or flu coming on. It was the standard fix for little aches and pains. He figured he'd go home, lie down for a little bit, and shake it off. So Adam gets home, he takes 2 Tylenol capsules, and he tells his wife he's not feeling well and he's going to go lie down for a bit. But within minutes, something was horribly wrong. He suddenly stumbled, gasping for breath. He managed to make it into the living room before collapsing in front of his wife and young children. Paramedics rushed Adam to Northwest Community Hospital, but by early afternoon, he was gone. The doctors were baffled, as they had been with Mary Kellerman. There were no signs of injury, no health conditions that could have explained why this sudden collapse happened. Adam's death was initially labeled as a sudden heart attack, tragic and very unexpected in a 27-year-old who was otherwise totally healthy, but it wasn't unheard of. We can only imagine what the shock of, I kind of know what the shock of losing Adam so suddenly felt like to loved ones. Something so fast like that, you can't even process. It's just, it's beyond your worst nightmare. And of course, his family all gathered together at his house to grieve and try to make sense of something you just can't understand and to support his widow and be there with their children. And his younger brother, Stanley, he was 25 at the time. He's there with his wife, Teresa, who's 20 years old. And so they're over at Adam's house with his widow and the kids, and they're trying to help make plans for the funeral, all the terrible arrangements that you need to make when something like this happens. They're all come together and they're just doing the best they can to support each other and get through this terrible time. At some point that afternoon, Stanley mentioned he had a headache, and why wouldn't he? His brother, who he loved, had just suddenly died, and he was probably running on adrenaline and heartbreak. So he did the same thing his brother did that morning. He reached for the Tylenol bottle, 2 capsules, and a glass of water, hoping the medication would give him a little bit of relief. Teresa decided to take 2 capsules as well, which happens all the time, doesn't it? If you take out, it's like, oh, I've got a headache, and someone's like, I could actually use a Tylenol.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so she took 2 capsules as well. And no one could have ever imagined what was about to happen, even in their most horrific nightmares. Because within minutes, Stanley slumped in his chair, gasping for breath. He began to foam at the mouth. Teresa rushed to help him. Then she also collapsed to the floor. Paramedics were called and they were rushed to the nearest hospital. But again, it was too late. They were declared dead soon after. And in a matter of one day, the Janus family had lost 3 of its family members.
It just didn't make any sense. 3 healthy young adults dead in the same house on the same day. The odds of that happening by chance are just astronomical. So at first there was talk of maybe a gas leak or, carbon monoxide poisoning, some environmental cause that could take out an entire household, but the fire department found no gas leaks, no carbon monoxide buildup, nothing. They even sent a nurse to assist, Helen Jensen. She was the only public health nurse in Arlington Heights. So she shows up at the house that day to try to figure out what on earth was going on. 3 healthy adults dying suddenly in the same house. It didn't make any sense to anyone. So she went from room to room, hoping to find anything that could explain what the hell had happened here. And then, in the kitchen, she noticed something. A receipt for a bottle of Tylenol bought that same morning. And then she finds the bottle and she counts the capsules. And there were 44 left, which led to the assumption that each of the 3 victims had probably taken 2 capsules each that very day. And the bottle was sent to the lab, and when the results came back, it was worse than anyone could have imagined. Those capsules weren't just Tylenol. They were filled with potassium cyanide, and not just a little bit. Each capsule had enough to kill someone 3 times over, basically. And we talked about potassium cyanide before, the white powdery substance that looks pretty harmless, almost like sugar. But make no mistake, it's incredibly toxic. Just a tiny amount is enough to kill someone in minutes. Cyanide stops your cells from using oxygen. Basically, it's like flipping a switch that turns off your body's ability to breathe on a microscopic level. You could be gasping for air, but your body can't use it, and it's a brutal way to die. I know it's always kind of portrayed in movies like you bite on the cyanide capsule, you're a spy, you're caught. You bite on the capsule and you're dead immediately. It takes minutes. It takes minutes of suffocating. It's quick, but if you're suffocating, 3-4 minutes is not quick.
No.
Cyanide has been used in everything from industrial processes like gold mining and electroplating. We mentioned this, I don't even know in how many episodes already. Some of the most notorious poisonings in history have been committed with cyanide. It's been a poison of choice for some of the world's worst figures when they decided it was their time to check out, like Hitler and his then already wife Eva Braun. They used cyanide capsules in that bunker in Berlin in 1945, biting down on them while simultaneously shooting themselves. Or better, Hitler shooting Eva Braun, but that's beside the point here. Josef and Magda Goebbels too, they poisoned their 6 kids with cyanide before taking it themselves. And then, of course, we have the Jonestown massacre. We talked about that extensively.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not something you'd expect or want to find in a bottle of Tylenol.
Unfortunately, these 4 deaths wouldn't be the only ones. Others would follow. And the thing about these deaths is how random they were. People who were just going about their normal day, doing the sort of things we all do without a second thought. And that randomness is what makes these stories feel like a gut punch every time I think about it. Because
so much so, yeah.
Whoever did this, well, we're going to get more into this, but you're just indiscriminately killing so many people.
And you don't know who. Who's it
You don't know who.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about Mary McFarland. Mary was a 31-year-old single mom. She was born in Chicago in 1950 to John and Jane Eliason. She was the second youngest of 5 children. In 1980, she landed a job at the Illinois Bell Telephone Company in Lombard. It was steady work, and she liked working there. I have my great aunts both worked at the AT&T Bell Company, and I have these 2 little gold bracelets that have the old telephone bell on them, and one has a tiny diamond chip, and the other one has 2. And each of the tiny diamond, when I say tiny diamond chip, each one was for 25 years of service. So one worked for 25 years and the other one worked there for 50 years.
I just remembered that. When we already talked about that?
Did we?
With the Wineville chicken coop murders.
Oh my goodness, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm always telling the same stories over and over.
It's just, that's not what I meant. But it's so interesting how so many times the same things come up over and over again in history, and in these cases, that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, it just popped into my mind. I'll take a picture and show you. It's a really sweet, I wear it all the time. Yeah, it was steady work. That was a great job back then. Like working for the telephone company, that was a respectable, steady, well-paying job. Like that was a good job. And she was happy there. She enjoyed it. She was also a member of the First Baptist Church in Elmhurst, and she had 2 sons, Ryan and Bradley, but her marriage to Warren McFarland hadn't worked out, and so she was raising the boys on her own. She would take them swimming, to the zoo, out to the park, wherever they could just be together, making the most of those long summer afternoons. According to family and loved ones, she had a sunny personality and a sharp sense of humor. She was hardworking and one of those people who just seemed to be able to juggle everything that life throws at them just effortlessly. On September 29th, she was at work when she felt a headache coming on. She reached for a bottle of Tylenol. She told her coworkers she wasn't feeling well, and she stepped into the break room to get a little bit of relief. But within minutes, she was on the floor, fighting to breathe. Her coworkers called for help right away, and the paramedics got her to Good Samaritan Hospital in Downers Grove. But despite everything they tried, Mary was gone by 3 a.m. on September 30th, leaving her beloved boys without a mother. At first, no one could understand how a healthy, vibrant 31-year-old mom could possibly die so suddenly. Doctors wondered, could it have been an aneurysm or a heart attack, some kind of medical issue? Because one moment she was fine and the next she was gone, with no warning. It's nothing.
And then there was Mary Reiner. She was born in Villa Park, Illinois in 1955 as the youngest in a big loving family. Her parents, Howard and Catherine, and her 7 siblings doted on her, calling her Lynn with affection. As she got older, Mary found her partner in life, Ed Reiner, and they clicked from the start and built a life together. By the early 1980s, they'd made a home in Winfield, raising their 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. And Mary had a real gift for making a house feel like home. She was an amazing cook, and she was always up for a game of softball or a night out bowling. In late September 1982, their household was especially busy, but also very joyful, because Mary and Ed had just welcomed their 4th child, a boy only a week earlier. Their other kids were 9, 8, and almost 2, so we can imagine it was a full house, filled with love, but also a lot of noise and chaos, I bet.
Oh, yeah.
But in the best possible way.
Absolutely. That's great age combinations, too, because you've got 2 super close together. And
2 sets,
2 sets, yeah. And then the older ones are just old enough to sort of help a little bit with the younger ones and feel like they're part of everything.
But everything changed on 30th of September, because that afternoon, Mary picked up a bottle of Tylenols at Frank's Finer Foods. And back at home, she took 2 capsules. She collapsed right in front of her 8-year-old daughter. And when Ed got home to find his wife unresponsive, he of course immediately called 911. And Mary was rushed to Central DuPage Hospital. Unfortunately, by the next morning, she was gone. One moment she's caring for her baby, and the next she's just gone, leaving the baby and the 3 other little kids without a mother.
And her poor husband. Oh, it's just devastating. I hope her kids are probably my parents' age, but I hope they went on to have...
No, the kids must be around our age, if it was 1982.
No, that's right. They're my parents' age, right. So that's what I meant to say. I hope they're all right.
Yeah.
On the off chance anyone's listening. The final victim that we need to discuss is Paula Prince. Paula was a 35-year-old flight attendant. She was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1946, and she was the youngest in a family of 4 children. Paula loved to travel, to meet new people, and to experience the world, so it probably wasn't a huge surprise to anyone that she decided to become a flight attendant for United Airlines. The job fit her perfectly. She was in the air, seeing the world, making friends wherever she went. In the early 1980s, Paula was living in a high-rise condo in Chicago's Old Town neighborhood. She had her whole life ahead of her, travel plans, work, nights out with friends. but on the night of September 29th, she had just come home from a flight and stopped at the Walgreens on Wells Street to pick up a bottle of Extra Strength Tylenol. Just a quick errand, one of those small, normal things you do at the end of a long day. She probably didn't give it a second thought and took it home to her apartment. We now know what was waiting for her in that bottle. At some point after she got home, Paula took at least one capsule to help with whatever ache or headache she'd brought home from the day. And then, nothing. For the next 2 days, no one could reach her. Her friends couldn't get her on the phone, and when her sister went to check on her at her apartment on October 1st, she found Paula there, already gone. The police found the bottle in her bathroom, the same bottle she'd picked up at Walgreens 2 nights before.
First of all, it's so hard to hear that she was found only a couple of days, a few days later, because that can happen to so many people, not because they're alone, but because you don't have anybody checking in on you daily. You live alone, you have an unsteady work schedule, for example. Nobody thinks anything if he can't reach you for 2 days. It's heartbreaking.
It is. This episode made me think of, they're all passed away now, but my mom and my aunt, there was a group of women that I grew up with, the people that are like your mother and your aunt's best friends from their childhood that you sort of know as well. Long story short, one was widowed and one had never married. And they were very, very close. But what they started doing when they turned around 50 or so, they had the idea that it would be really smart just to check in with each other every single morning. So every single morning at a specific time, they'd call and say good morning, and they'd have their tea or coffee together, whatever. And it was such a smart thing to do. And it really became a lifeline as they got older. Everyone knew that really that whole crowd was looking after each other, but it's really not a bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so much harder, like, for example, in this case, a flight attendant.
Well, this is it. And in her case especially, I think is difficult because I think maybe if she had a different job and if it was a different time, you have to remember, like, it feels awful that she was undiscovered for 2 days. But you have to remember also back then, nobody was texting anybody. Nobody had a cell phone. There was none of that. It was really, really common. My best friend and I primarily communicated by letter. We wrote letters, and I still have boxes of letters because at that time, long-distance phone calls were very, very expensive. So it is very sad that she was alone for those 2 days, but it's not sad in the sense that she didn't have anyone who cared.
Exactly, that's what I meant, yeah. Yeah, it's not that she wasn't loved and cared for and looked after, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It's just so sad.
None of these victims were people looking for trouble. They weren't taking risks or living on the edge. They were mothers, children, workers, neighbors. They were just people who trusted a bottle with medication that they've been taking I don't know how many times, and they thought it would do exactly what it had always done, make them feel a little better, ease the pain.
Well, they were taking over-the-counter medication as directed. Yeah. So there should not be it should be such an infinitesimally tiny chance, that anything would happen.
And none of these people knew each other. They never crossed paths. They didn't share anything except for the brand of the over-the-counter painkiller, Tylenol by Johnson & Johnson.
It's just so random.
So random, yeah.
Yeah.
So at first, it didn't seem like this death could possibly be connected. I don't even think they thought about that in the beginning. They were scattered across the Chicago area. There were different neighborhoods, different lives. The young girl, the new mother, a postal worker, a flight attendant, a single mother. It didn't make sense. Also, they didn't have these kind of things weren't connected in an online computer system where the police put in the information that didn't exist back then.
That's right. You had a whole bunch of individual terrible situations.
Unconnected situations, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
But the investigators quickly realized that in every case, the victims had taken Tylenol extra strength capsules just moments before they died. So that must be the link. And once they started testing those capsules, in the Janus family case, it got even clearer and so much more terrifying. every single one of them had been laced with enough potassium cyanide to kill someone several times over. The first press conference was held pretty quickly. Public health officials and police stepped up to those microphones and they said it out loud. Tylenol was the common factor. 7 deaths, all linked by those little red and white capsules. Once the cyanide poisoning was confirmed, there was no time to waste. Pharmacies across Chicago started pulling Tylenol from the shelves immediately, while police and health workers scrambled to track down every bottle they could find. Hospitals were told to treat every case of sudden collapse or dizziness like it could be cyanide poisoning. By the next day, so October 1st, 1982, the story was everywhere. News anchors were telling people to throw out any Tylenol they had at home. It wasn't just Chicago, it was nationwide. People in other cities who'd never even heard of places like Arlington Heights were suddenly dumping their Tylenol bottles in the trash, terrified that they might be next. And Johnson & Johnson, so the company behind Tylenol, knew they had to act fast. No one knew if the capsules had been tampered with after they left the factory or before, and no one knew who was behind it or why. So Johnson & Johnson issued their own recall, 31 million bottles yanked from store shelves and medicine cabinets across the country.
31 million. 31 million. It was one of the largest product recalls in American history, and it cost them more than $100 million. But they did it. They knew that the only way to keep people's trust was to show them that safety came first. And honestly, it's still seen as one of the best examples of corporate crisis management out there, because that decision to yank everything, even before they were legally forced to, probably saved lives, and it definitely set a new standard for how companies should handle something just like this.
But still, the idea that someone had taken something as familiar and trusted as Tylenol and turned it into a murder weapon was enough to send a chill through every home. Not only in Chicago, as I said, nationwide. People emptied out their entire medicine cabinets. They packed up any bottle that looked suspicious, any pill that didn't feel safe anymore. Police stations started to look like tiny pharmacies themselves because the people lined up to hand over anything that had a Tylenol label on it. And the phone lines at the poison control centers were now jammed with people asking what to do, how to tell if they'd been poisoned, how to keep their family safe. And it was the kind of panic that spread from house to house to house in days. And as you said before, Annie, this was the era of the phone tree, friends calling friends and moms telling neighbors to check every bottle. It was not TikTok and Twitter and Facebook informing you.
That's right. There were no Amber Alerts going off and, on your phones.
They also had police cars and vans driving through neighborhoods in Chicago with loudspeakers warning people directly to stop taking Tylenol. Can you even imagine that?
That's wild, isn't it?
Stop taking Tylenol, check your medicine cabinet, throw out something,
Yeah. Well, it's the kind of thing, like we said before, there's no identifiable victim. There's no identifiable motive. And so all of a sudden, everyone is a potential victim because, okay, if there's cyanide in Tylenol, what else is cyanide in?
Yeah.
Could it be in anything else?
Yeah.
You don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
Is it coming to more cities? Is it coming to more products? Like, what's the end game?
Yeah.
What's the end game?
What does this person want?
Yeah, what do they ultimately, what was the goal here? You just enjoy terrifying people? You just randomly wanted to kill random people? It's hard to parse out, like, what kind of sick mind, obviously, but just, I don't know. I think this is probably a good time to stop for this week because we have a lot more to talk about before we start speculating, I think, right?
Yeah.
And next week, we're going to tell you all about the investigation and the suspects. So, something good.
You have something good.
I do. The concert?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had a really nice time with Paul this past weekend. I went to see, well, it actually I felt terrible. My friend Tam was supposed to go to see OK Go, and then she had a different event come up that she couldn't miss. And she said, "Do you want these tickets?" And I said, yes, because my sister, the Moose, took me to see the Fray, and she got me tickets to the Fray with OK Go, and it was in 2008, maybe 2007, at the old Great Woods. I'm not sure what it's called now. The venue in Mansfield, Mass. You all know what I mean. And they were so good. They were so good. And OK Go was wonderful. They were so fun live. And then I have twice more had tickets for them. And on both occasions, one time I was actually in the hospital, and the other time I think I had just gotten out of the hospital, but I was too sick. I couldn't go. So I missed twice. And so finally, it was Paul's first time seeing them. I got to see them again. Fantastic. And if you don't know OK Go, if you're into visual stuff, go check out their videos. They hit the scene doing that treadmill video way back when. But one of the ones I wanted to send you, Johanna, they did a whole video in that plane that's called the Vomit Comet. You know, the one where it climbs and then to experience weightlessness.
Yeah.
It's them and these dancers / stewardesses, I guess. But it's literally, the whole thing is filmed in one shot in one of those planes. So it's pretty wild. Their videos are next level. They're amazing, amazing, amazing art. So yeah, that's it. That's my good thing.
I'm so glad you could go.
Ooh, also adding to the tally of things I've eaten. So what did I tell you so far? Pickles, olives,
strawberries,
melon, and I had a blueberry muffin today.
Yes. Starting to enjoy the pleasures of culinary life again.
Yes, over the weekend, I had a little bit of, Johanna, I had a lettuce on my sandwich. It was my first lettuce in 20 years.
Wow.
It was really nice. So I forgot how nice. I know. I had a chicken salad sandwich with bacon and lettuce on it. And I forgot how nice crispy lettuce is with bacon and chicken.
It's like crispy water.
Yes. It was so good.
My something good is that we celebrated my nephew's 16th birthday over the weekend.
Yay.
I can't believe he's 16. 16.
I can't believe he's 16. He was 10 when we started this.
Yeah.
I know.
And now he's so tall and he's heading towards the 20. Like, what is going on?
He's so handsome. I'm like, where's that little kid?
Where's that kid?
Yeah.
So yeah, on Saturday, we took him to this Asian restaurant we often go to where these cat robots serve you food, and yeah, it's fun. And then on Sunday, so yesterday, we went to see the other part of the family, the other half of the family, and it was so nice to just see everyone again. But I ate way too much food. I drove way too many kilometers, and I was exhausted yesterday.
I'm sorry.
This week is going to be a little bit less driving, I hope.
I hope so. Yeah.
But it was good.
It's going to be hot here this week, like gross hot.
Same here. Last week I was still, freezing in bed and having to light a fire because it was so cool in the evening. And now it's hot. Now with the rain, and it's going to have 30 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hot and humid, which I like. I love it, but I know most people hate it.
I don't. It's going to be 90 here, hot and humid. So, yeah, my friend Dawn came last weekend. I'm at that age now where it was super fun because I have lots of those white daisies, Shasta daisies, and she has a lot of black-eyed Susans, like the yellow ones with the dark brown or black in the middle. So she brought me some clumps of her daisies, and I've given her some clumps of mine. And she brought me some little saplings of different things. So after I finish this, I'm going to go out and give them some water because I don't think it's going to rain again for the next however long.
See, that's why I love the rain. I always used to hate rain when I was a young adult because summer was for me just, going to the Danube, swimming, lying in the sun. But ever since I had a garden, I view that completely different. I'm like, now the joke where the elderly, the middle-aged people are like sitting on the porch when it's raining and saying, "We needed this." That's reality.
We needed that.
We needed that.
That's us. That's right. Yeah, it totally is, though. It's really true. And listen, we had our fun. We had our wild days. We're just happy to get some rain. I love stormy weather. Stormy weather, like thunderstorms, I'm sure I've said this before, is my favorite, which is why I get so, it's like doubly angsty that weather gives me migraines.
All right. I think that's it, right?
Yeah, that's it. Listen, you all know the drill. Please rate and leave a review. We would love it so much. Be the first to review us in June. Wouldn't that be good? Tell us what you want us to cover in your reviews. That would be great. If you listen to us on YouTube, then hello and thank you for listening on YouTube. Please like and subscribe so that you can get notifications and just see all of our stuff when you're ready to listen to it. And if you rate or review us, it's such a huge help for getting our show to new ears. We don't spend money on advertising because we don't have it. So please.
Can't spend what you don't have.
That's it, right? Listen, I'm just going to be honest with you. We can't afford it. So please, that's the best thing you can do is just leave a little review saying you thought it was great.
Takes a couple of minutes, costs you nothing, and it helps so much.
That's right.
Yeah.
So much.
And if you want to support the podcast directly, we'd love to have you join us on Patreon. You get bonus content, early access, Cinema Macabre. Annie and I were in a private chat last week. It was fun.
So fun with my blanket.
We faked it. I don't want to, clickbait you. We were not really in a private chat.
Oh, no. We're never really anywhere.
No.
We're in these like dark holes in our house that it's fine. It's fine.
Also, join us on Spotify or YouTube as a subscription. You get also the early access and the bonus content. Yeah.
You can find all the info on where to reach us and how to find us on our webpage, which is freshhellpodcast.com. So if you have a story idea or you just want to say hi, I have so many emails, by the way, that because of the migraines, I'm very, very backed up on. So if you sent me an email ages ago and I have not responded, me personally, Annie, please feel free to just send it again. I apologize, but the I don't know how to explain like all the time that I have in the world where I'm okay enough to sort of read or write is spent on the podcast. So sorry about that. It's not because I don't love you. I'm not trying to ignore anybody.
But we read everything.
We read everything. And then I'll say, oh, that's so nice. I'm going to get back to them tomorrow when I feel well. And then 3 months later, it feels like yesterday. So I'm the worst. I apologize. I love you all. Please don't think that I don't care. I'm not looking at things. Yeah. If you're feeling especially old school, you can send us stuff at our P.O. box. And there are details there on the website. So I think that's everything you need to find us.
And just on cue come the tippy toes of Jem, who reminds me, not so gently, that it's time for his evening snack. So tell your pets, Jem says hi.
That's
Hug
right.
them, cuddle them. Give them their evening snack, not 29 minutes too late.
No, never 29 minutes too late.
Be kind to them. Be kind to your fellow human being. And also be kind to yourself.
That's right. Sometimes it's really hard to be kind to yourself, but you gotta do it. That's all. It's a hard time right now, friends. The world is madness. And so please, just keep going. And remember, especially if you're going through hell,
there's nothing left to do than keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.